they just don't teach the virtues anymore, especially the cardinal ones. And the cardinal virtues are responsible for the the moral motivation that students need in order to be consecrated students who are dedicated and have a desire, a willingness to learn, an easiness to learn. They need to have that moral reasoning within them for why they're going to do what they're going to do. Why are they going to put so much effort into their education? Well, that's what the great books teach. They teach the morality of being a human being. They teach the morality of who we are and how society best functions. They teach the beauty of God's plan for them, and it goes on and on. And in public schools, they have a very passive learning model. Teachers are just dumping facts into them. They're opening their heads and just dumping the facts in and requiring them to memorize them. It's kind of force-fed system. Here it comes down the conveyor belt. You better process it as it comes by because it's not going to last very long. So it's very passive learning. The students are being acted upon instead of acting for themselves, and that kills desire. It kills that willingness to learn. Hey, my friend, welcome to the Phillip Mason Show, where acquiring wisdom is king and pursuing education is a lifelong adventure. I'm your host, Phillip Mason, and I am delighted to have this time with you today. So today for our episode, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about the second step to wisdom, which is a willingness to learn. So for your benefit, I'll go ahead and link the video where I made a video about the first 10 steps to wisdom. So you can freshen up on that if you would like, on what those first steps are. But today in this video, we're going to focus on the second step to wisdom, which is a willingness to learn. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, this seems like kind of a cheesy step, right? Willingness to learn. Can't I just snap my fingers and be willing to learn and I'm good to go? Why do I need to learn about this? Why do we need to talk about this? Well, the reality is this is something that the best learners and the wisest people on this planet, they've spent a whole life cultivating a desire to learn, a desire to develop wisdom and to gain knowledge. And it's been a lifelong practice for them, this willingness to learn. And most people don't have a willingness to learn. I can tell you that from personal experience, having been a professional teacher and also an amateur teacher, and on a lot of different fronts and in a lot of different organizations. I've in a lot of different sectors of our society as a teacher in those areas. I can tell you a lot of people do not have a desire or just an overall attitude of willingness to learn. And it really handicaps them. It really handicaps them in a lot of different ways. And it's really sad to see. And a lot of our rising generation do not have a desire to learn. And there's some key reasons why that's occurring. And I'll cover some of that today in our video. But a willingness to learn has to be developed within you. There has to be an easiness about you that you just want to soak things in. You're this human sponge, and you want to soak it all in, and you're going to carry it despite the weight of it. Even though it's heavy, you're going to take it in because you have a thirst for it. Now, there's also a quality of having your freedom of soul. So having freedom of soul or freedom of mind puts you in the right mindset, or I like to call it the highest willingness to learn and to explore. So being able to have freedom and culturally to have it, and also it helps to have a government structure that supports freedom. A lot of people are in countries that don't have a government structure that supports freedom, and that actually prevents them from having a willingness to learn. It was interesting. I served a church mission. At one point, we interacted with a whole group of Russian immigrants to America. They'd been here for a while when we ran into them, but we were talking to them, really nice people, but they perceived that anything that we shared with them was just propaganda. And that's what you get from communist countries or countries that have been communist in the past, is there's no freedom to learn. You have to believe what the state tells you. And so to them, everything is propaganda, and they don't know how to discern between truth and error. And they don't really have a hunger for the truth because they just assume that everything they're being fed is baloney. It's just garbage, right? So having a free government structure is super helpful, but having a free society where people are free and open to learn whatever they want to learn, study whatever they want to learn is very important. Um, Even if it's topics that you don't believe in or don't agree with, you certainly don't have to participate in them. But allowing others to have that freedom helps preserve that freedom to learn for yourself, and that's really critical. There's another point I'd like to make here, and that's, you have to have a desire for knowledge and a willingness to receive that knowledge. Just like you want food and you need food, like I don't know of too many people that miss meals, and when they do, there's usually something wrong that's happening in their life. Maybe there's a mental illness or they're having a physical illness and that prevents them from wanting food. But all of us have a desire for food and for water, and we seek after it. Like we have a huge desire for it. We put a lot of effort into getting food. And the same goes for air. We all love to breathe, and if we don't have air for more than a few seconds, it's a problem, right? And we have an intense desire for air, and so we really should have that same intensity for learning and for wisdom that we do for air and for food and for water. That's and that's really kind of the direction that we're going here in this video today. Now, I just want to share a story with you that happened today. I was with my son, Troy. We are driving in the car. He and I go and work out in the mornings at the gym together, my teenage son. And we were driving together. We are actually coming back from the gym. And he was just really quiet for a moment. And then he says, "Hey, Dad, do you think I'm ahead of my peers in my schooling?" And I just kinda looked at him and I said, Compared to your peers in the public school, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, they've had a different type of education than you've had, and that's what makes all the difference." And he looked at me and he said, "They call me the intellectual giant." His friends call him the intellectual giant. And and I looked at him, and the way he said it, I could tell that he didn't view himself that way. So I said, "You don't think you're an intellectual giant?" He's like, "No, not at all." And I was like, "Well, I don't view you as an intellectual giant either." Um, and that's okay. That's fine. My this particular son is very athletic. He's very strong. He loves being outdoors, and being a good student isn't his favorite task, honestly. But he loves to learn. He loves learning. He has a desire for learning, and he actually has a desire to go in the military and pursue a military career. So I asked him. I said, "Well, how do you feel about your education?" And he says, "Well, I just don't know. Like, I don't know what else I'm missing out on." And I said, "Well, I can tell you what's going on. So your friends, they're in the public school system, and they're in a system. It's a conveyor belt system, and they're force fed different subjects, and they know a lot of facts, and a lot of the schools are geared towards STEM topics. So they get a lot of geometry, and they get a lot of facts, and they get a lot of science topics. So they know a lot of facts about different things. But they call you the intellectual giant because of the type of education you get. You're getting a wisdom education. You're getting a classical education. You're getting a great books education, and you're learning how to process deep thoughts and to reason through things, to use logic, and to develop great insights and great ideas, to write about them and to pursue them. And they're not getting that in the public schools. They don't read great books in the public schools. They don't spend time discussing great thoughts. They don't spend time writing papers that go into great depth on important philosophical and intellectual topics. They just don't do that at all. And so that really holds them back in all the things that they're doing. You have a type of education that uses your logic and your reasoning much more powerfully than what they're accustomed to in the public schools. They don't get the kind of education that you get. They don't know how to reason through things. They don't read the great books. They don't have the great ideas. They don't have the great source of knowledge that you do from reading those great books. And so you have a lot of great insights on human character, human behavior, human morality, and how governments form and how governments work, how governments should be structured, and you just know a lot about how the world operates. Their education, on the other hand, is very science and math based. There's a lot of STEM topics, and they get crammed in a conveyor belt method with facts, whereas you're being taught to think freely, to think openly, and to reason and to develop insights and to read something and to pull out insights to extract it. Where on the other hand, their education is very passive and they're just being force fed facts and knowledge, and they're not being required to gain understanding. They're not being required to develop wisdom and putting things into practical application, as well as high theoretical thought. They're just not required to do that in the public school system. So you kind of have this advantage over them, and they recognize that in the way that you communicate and the way that you share. And it produces a powerful effect upon their minds when they see you being able to pull out insights and be able to talk about deep and heavy topics with ease. And so that's why they call you the intellectual giant. And it's not because you are, it's just because they're lacking the education that you've gotten. And really, anyone could have that type of education if they had a liberal arts education, they had a classical education, if they read the great books, they could be in the same position as you. And I know you don't consider yourself a great scholar or a great student or anything, but anyone can have a high level of intelligence and reasoning by having this type of education. So having the right type of education makes all of the difference. So that homeschooling education where we're teaching from the best books, reading, writing, studying, discussing, presenting, debating, all of that is so critical to developing the brain and the mind to be a powerful thinker, to be a powerful statesman, to be a powerful leader. And they're just not doing that in the public school system. If students graduate from the public school system and they have that ability, it's because they're doing something at home on their own with their parents. So the type of learning that can be done in homeschooling is superior to what is being done in the in the public schools. It produces a superior student. Now, there's nothing wrong with learning the STEM subjects. It's great and wonderful, but if that's all you do, it's poorly balanced, and you become very lopsided, and you get yourself in trouble over time if you don't have that moral training. Now, the public school system, I've talked a lot about how the public school system really has deteriorated over the last 80 and 90 years at an incredible rate, and it just keeps getting worse all the time. But public schools, they actually kill the desire to learn. So students don't have this willingness to learn. So I'm just going to highlight 6 ways that they do this. Now, I could come up with a list of 50 or 60 pretty easily of ways that they kill the desire to learn. Um, and then I'm also going to share some ways that homeschoolers, a home education program where students are able to get in there with their parents and just learn, just study, learn what's interesting to them and be able to figure out how the world works and read the great books and do all those wonderful things. So I'm going to share those 6 things that homeschool does to build desire as well. So let's go through this. So let's start with public schools kill desire by. So the first one I've got here is just wasting time. We waste so much time in public schools. Just processing students takes so much time. And a lot of public schools have big classes, big class sizes, which causes the teachers to spend a lot of time just doing administrative work and a lot of time just managing behavior, and they're not actually teaching. This is a huge problem in our public schools across the board. And it quite frankly, it exhausts the teachers. It wears them out. They're struggling. So number 2 is push-ins. So there's been a big movement. A lot of this, this is all government driven, and I understand the reasoning behind it, and there's a big push for it. I think among certain parts of our society. But the push-ins is this concept of they're pushing in special ed students into the normal regular classrooms. And I know this is a really sensitive topic, and I know people have a lot of strong feelings on this. And my purpose here isn't to try to understand every person's individualized special education needs, which there's hundreds of them, and it would be impossible for me to go through all of them. But the challenge is that teachers are already stretched thin. They already have big classes. They already have a wide spectrum of students that they have to teach to. And then if you have special needs students that come in that have all sorts of different needs, the challenges with this push in is that the teachers just don't have the resources or the support that they need. And if they do, it's an exception rather than the rule. And so it's a huge problem, and it's causing more burnout among teachers. And some of the argument for it is that the special needs students, you want to feel included with the with other students that are in the normal classrooms, and I get that. That makes sense. I can see how that would be a benefit. But there are challenges that come with that type of forced socialization too. Um, so arguments can go either way on this, but the main point here that I'm making is that teachers are struggling already, and then if you put special needs students in there with them without proper resources, it becomes a huge it's a huge time crunch. It's a huge effort. It can be exhausting for the teachers. Okay, this is number 2, and then we're gonna go to number 3 here. So teachers, when they're teaching in a big classroom like that, they're searching for equilibrium. So they're trying to figure out how to best benefit the largest number of students. And so what that means is the top students get bored, their needs aren't being met, and the bottom students get left behind, is what inevitably happens. And teachers will work 12, 13-hour days to try to accommodate all the students, but they eventually get burned out. And it's not good, it's not healthy. A lot of teachers are just quitting and going to jobs that pay a lot better, and it's a mess. Okay, so number 4, ignoring cardinal virtues. So this is a big one with the public schools. They just don't teach the virtues anymore, especially the cardinal ones. And the cardinal virtues are responsible for the the moral motivation that students need in order to be consecrated students who are dedicated and have a desire, a willingness to learn, an easiness to learn. They need to have that moral reasoning within them for why they're going to do what they're going to do. Why are they going to put so much effort into their education? Well, that's what the great books teach. They teach the morality of being a human being. They teach the morality of who we are and how society best functions. They teach the beauty of God's plan for them, and it goes on and on. Now, let's move on to number 5 here. So number 5 is in the public schools, they have huge overstructured days that leave little time for unstructured learning exploration. And this is across the board. And what's boggling to my mind is how they keep pushing the age down and down to younger and younger ages. We're getting to the point where we're almost like China, where as soon as they're born, they're put into a state institution. You just, you're having children, at age 3 and 4 who are, being dumped off with a teacher and being put into the school system, or some sort of program. And really, we're forcing this fact-fed conveyor belt system into our younger and younger children, which, quite frankly, to me is reminiscent of some of the Nazi youth programs and childcare programs that were being instituted during the Nazi socialist regime that caused World War I and World War II in a lot of different aspects, especially World War II under Hitler. But I digress. So public schools are just way too overstructured. Students don't have free time. They're so structured, they feel like they're in prison, and it just kills their desire to learn. It kills their willingness to learn. Okay, so let's move on to number 6. And in public schools, they have a very passive learning model. And teachers are just dumping facts into them. They're opening their heads and just dumping the facts in and requiring them to memorize them. It's kind of force-fed system. Here it comes down the conveyor belt. You better process it as it comes by because it's not going to last very long. So it's very passive learning. The students are being acted upon instead of acting for themselves, and that kills desire. It kills that willingness to learn. All right, so let's move on here. Let's go to the 6 ways that homeschooling or home education program can build desire. So the first one is just time efficiency. Students get to work right away. There's no delay. And if there's a delay, it's a personal character thing, and they can work through that. Parents can help with that, and they can work when they're most productive. Some students do really well just right out of the gate early morning. Some do better in the afternoon because of health reasons, whatever. And so you can customize your day, and you don't have to waste time waiting for other students to do things or for the teacher to do something. You can have your program, your curriculum. You can just jump right into it. You can have your book, just start writing and reading, and mom and dad can help supervise, and it's very efficient. So number 2 is parents are able to tailor curriculum for their child's needs. So a regular teacher in a public school classroom, he or she is gonna do what's best for the majority of the students, or what the school district dictates, and is really what it comes down to as the curriculum, and that's really what's gonna happen. It's not necessarily what's best for that particular student's needs. It's just kind of a general broad, and oftentimes it's very watered down, very a lot of the curriculums today are just very blah, just very malaise, you know, frosted glass. It's hard to see anything through it. A lot of curriculum today is just very dry and boring and dull, if I can just be honest here. Okay, so tailoring that curriculum is very important for parents, and they can do that very easily. There's just so many great resources out there, and so many great books to read. The opportunity is just endless. And the public school just does a narrow sliver of what is actually possible. Okay, so number 3, and I think this is huge. So the parent loves their child better than any teacher at any school can, and that's the truth. Now, of course, there's always exceptions to that. You know, some parents have a ways to go in the way that they care and love for their child. I get that. There's exceptions, but by and far, the rule is the parents will always love their children more than anyone outside of the family. And that love is one of the cardinal virtues, and it is a powerful motivator. When children know that their mom or their dad love them and that they want them to learn these things because it'll help them be like them, man, children are all over that. They can't get enough of it. It's just so motivating for them to see their parents who they adore and look up to and admire all the great things that they can do, to be able to say, "Oh, this is an opportunity for me to be like mom and dad, to do the things that mom and dad do, to say the things that mom and dad say." I have an 8-year-old, and I can tell you he mimics everything I do. He mimics everything my wife does. His imagination is so vibrant. Like, he is just always always learning, always absorbing, and he's always just processing what he's learning and what he's taking in from his siblings and from his parents and from uh and from other activities, other homeschool groups, co-ops, and other things, and just always processing it. He even still has his imaginary friend who is he calls Jacob, and Jacob's pretty much a Superman. There's not anything he can't do, but he always likes to relate things to what Jacob can do. What's the potential for Jacob to become, and how does he do it? And he's always happy to explain to us how Jacob is just this amazing man for all seasons. And it's really charming. But it's how he's processing, it's how he's learning, it's how he's exploring the world around him, and he's just soaking it all in, and he just wants to learn it all. And in a home environment like that, where there's love from mom and dad, that the child just blossoms, and there's just no end to it. Okay, so that's number 3. So now we're moving on to number 4. So the beauty of homeschooling and, doing your own homeschool program is that the parents get to teach morality. They get to teach religion. They get to teach freedom principles. They get to teach patriotism without negative influences or cultural systems dictating popular beliefs that may be at odds with family values and with the principles that the family operates on, or with their religious beliefs. And that's really important. And quite frankly, my guess is that's probably the number one reason why most parents pull their kids out of public schools and homeschool them. Hands down, I bet that's the number one reason. Because parents are realizing that their kids are getting messed over. Their kids are being deranged mentally, spiritually in the schools, and they're just getting all the wrong messaging. about everything. Okay, so let's move on here. So number 5, homeschool builds desire, by unstructured time for learning, to read, to write, to play, to build, to engineer, to explore. And that's just the beauty of being able to learn at home is you can just explore, you can learn, you can reverse engineer, you can build, you can play, you can write, you can read, you can have debates, you can have conversations, you can have pen pals. I mean, you can go to co-ops and do all sorts of cool activities. I mean, it's absolutely endless. One of the things that I love that my kids do is in their co-op with other students, they'll actually write books. They can be fiction or nonfiction, either way. But then they'll have their friends in the co-op and even their parents, other parents that are in the co-op, read their stories and provide feedback on it or give them ideas to continue to write it, and they'll actually read each other's stories, and it's absolutely a beautiful thing. So that unstructured time is just it's absolutely magical, and you don't get that in the public school system. You just don't. Okay, so number 6, the last one here, you get proactive learning in a homeschool environment. So the student searches for the best answers to the best questions. And that's what should be happening in a homeschool environment. There shouldn't be anything but that. Just that, the exploration, that freedom to explore, to learn and grow. Now, parents putting structure in can be important, can be helpful, and some students are going to need it more than others, and I'm not discounting that at all. But that freedom of mind and that freedom of heart to be able to explore and to ask questions and to find out where that question leads and to be able to search up different answers and to reason through those answers, that's just so powerful. That proactive learning is just untouchable as far as being able to cultivate a willingness in a student's heart and mind to learn and to have a hunger for learning. Now, I'm just going to throw in a warning here to parents everywhere. One of the traps that my wife and I have seen over and over again is that so many parents who start homeschooling because they've been taught in the public school systems themselves, they're in this trap, this mindset that the conveyor belt method and approach of education in America is the way that they should do education at home. And I'm here to tell you it's not the way to do it at home. Don't try to mimic what they do in the public school systems. You pulled your child out of this system in the first place. It didn't work. It's still not working. And it's not going to work going in the future. You pulled your child out because you could do it better at home. So don't try to mimic or do what they do in the public school system. Get as far away from it as you possibly can. Like unlearn these behaviors that you have ingrained in you, that you have conditioned in you from your own public school system training. So get off that conveyor belt. Start thinking like one of the founding fathers of America, like James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. Man, major innovators, huge self educators, just absolutely masterful in how they went about their intellectual improvement. And really, they're the reason why our nation is so great today is because they put all these powerful ideas into form and function here in America because they had an awesome education and they experimented and they worked and they read and they studied all the great books. So James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton are great examples of people who have this tremendous willingness to learn, and they have this easiness to learn. Thomas Jefferson was phenomenal. When he was studying law, he went for 5 years, and because he kept really detailed records, we know that oftentimes he studied for 11, 12 hours a day, sometimes 16 hours a day. And he just did this consistently day after day for years, for 5 years, just learning the law, just the law. And he learned and studied so many other things, just absolutely phenomenal. But that's the power when you ditch all the structure, you ditch all of the passive learning models, and you just start being proactive and you have this hunger and desire. And it's hard to replicate that, but it produces intellectual giants. It produces men like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, who just became powerhouses because of their education. Now, they had natural talent too, granted, but They did education differently than we do it today, and it made all the difference. It makes all the difference. It's why my son, who I talked about earlier, it's why his friends think he's an intellectual giant, but yet he knows he's not. But he's just had the right type of education. He's had the right type of training, and that's made all the difference. And his friends aren't getting the right type of education, and that's why they're struggling to hold conversations. They're struggling to be able to debate important issues. They're struggling to be able to understand the principles of life and understand the structures of governments and to be able to understand how societies work. They just struggle to understand those things because it's not being taught in society. They're not financially savvy. They don't have a financial education. They don't have a moral education, and it really hurts them in a lot of different ways. Okay, so I just wanted to share that warning with you, and it's so critical that you understand that and that you just take confidence in your own ability to educate your children. And really, you just start with reading, writing, and conversation discussion. That's just really the best way to do it. You pick out some of the best books, you just jump in and get started, and then you can get more sophisticated from there. But you got to have that as your foundation. Okay, so we're talking about willingness to learn. I want to share with you some things that I've gathered from Socrates, one of the great Greek philosophers, who just had this tremendous willingness to learn. In fact, he was so willing to learn that he literally dropped everything else out of his life to learn and to reason with people and to uh, basically find the truth. What is the truth? What works? What doesn't work? That's what Socrates was all about. And he's a tremendous example of just being a very enthusiastic, desired filled individual to seek wisdom, to seek truth, and to seek learning. So I'm going to go through, I've got 5 things here that Socrates said that I think help us to understand this willingness to learn and the power that's comes with that willingness to learn. All right. So the very first one, number one, he says, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. So this is one of the key concepts or ideas from Socrates, from Plato's dialogues of him. And so there's this idea of having this almost painful awareness of your own ignorance. One of the challenges that we have with today's youth and today's children is because they're on their phones so much and they have so much information thrown at them, they think they know everything. But really, the right attitude is to put your pride aside and say, I know nothing. And when you say that, it opens you up to have a willingness to learn. And once you can do that, where it's internalized in your heart and it's up here in your mind as well, you become a powerful student. And that's when you really start to gain wisdom in a wonderful way. And Socrates was truly wise in understanding human pride and recognizing that human pride actually prevents you from knowing the truth. Okay, so that's number one. Going to number two here. Sometimes these aren't direct quotes, but these are ideas from his teachings and writings. So wonder is the beginning of wisdom. So I've talked a lot about this. I usually use the words discovery or exploration, but wonder is the beginning of wisdom. We need more students who wonder about the world around them, that are curious about the world around them, who imagine up what certain things are like in all of their efforts. So having that intellectual hunger is very critical, very important for the success of our students, the success of our children. So once again, you know, we can't go too long without water. It's just a matter of days. We can't go too long without food. It's just a matter of weeks. And we don't have that. We starve and shrivel up. And we have a lot of people who are intellectually starved and they're shriveled up. They can't think or reason or process very well. They can't communicate very well. They don't know the truth when they see it. They don't understand how their government's supposed to work. They don't know how to function in the workplace. There's all sorts of problems that come out of having graduating students out of public school systems who don't have a hunger for the truth and don't have a way to be able to acquire more truth because they've never learned how to learn. They don't have a willingness to learn. They don't want to read any books. They don't have a desire to read. They hate books. When you have a society when people hate books, that's a problem because you're going to lose your freedom. You're going to lose all the good parts of your society and you get to keep all the bad parts. And the only time you get the good parts back is when you have a society full of people who are reading the best books again and who are willing to live by them. And that's where wisdom comes into play. And that's why wisdom is so important, is because that's what makes your society free. It's what makes your society great. It's what makes your society happy, is when you have that type of education that fills the soul, it brings joy to the soul and liberates you from captivity, allows you to be able to provide for your family, allows you to be able to choose the right to act morally. It allows you to build a righteous family and to get married. It allows you to be able to know who to vote for and when it comes to elections and who not to vote for. Education is so incredibly powerful. It helps you recognize when there's threats to your safety and to your happiness and to be able to act on it. So education is incredibly important that way. And we're just neglecting it. Okay. So moving on here. So number 3, but he's the idea here is education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. So a vessel being like a pitcher or a jar, something like that, a water cistern. So if you think about what it takes to start a fire, if you have your Boy Scout and they got some kindling and a little bit of flint and steel wool or whatever it is they have some kindling and a little bit of moss, dried out moss, and they're gonna use metal pieces to be able to get a few sparks into that kindling so that they can blow on it, so that they can fan the flames and eventually get enough heat there to actually burn some wood. That's the way all education starts out. And we have to remember that as parents, is that with our children, it's just a little bit of nourishment at a time, step by step, milk before the meat, and that kindling of the flame. And eventually that flame gets so hot that there's nothing the flame can't consume. You can eventually get fires hot enough to melt metal. And when you get that hot, you're able to purify metals and to refine them and get rid of the dross, the imperfections out of them. And that's what happens with the great books. You start out with lesser books, and then you move to the greatest books that have ever been produced on the planet. And as you move up through that, it removes the dross. It refines you and makes you a better person. It makes your soul better. It makes your mind better. And just like, as they purify silver and gold and they remove the dross out of it, all the impurities out of the metal, so it's 100% pure, or as pure as it can get. But it requires high temperatures. It requires an uncomfortable environment. So sometimes to be educated, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to do the work in order to be able to get that high level of purity, that high level of wisdom, that high level of beauty and strength and nobility. And so you start off with that little flame all to the point where you have, a hot oven that can melt metal. And so that's kind of the analogy there. So you have to have the ignition, but you have to maintain it and build it. And that's what you want to do over your whole life. You want to get to the point where your education refines you as a person and helps develop you into a great person, because you've had a great education. And we just need more people like that. So the other thing that's important with this idea here is private education, or education at home, is really the kindling of the flame. That's the goal of the parent, is to kindle the flame with the student or with their child. And you're trying to find ways to help them explore and to learn and get them excited about them, help them figure out what their talents are, what things they're interested in, help them just get a breadth of different topics and subjects and find out what's most interesting to them. And then once you find those topics that they're really interested in, then start going really deep with them. And it will kindle a flame in your child in such a way that they'll never want to stop learning. If you do that on a consistent basis, it'll develop a habit within them that'll last the rest of their life. And it's just absolutely profound. So on the other hand, public school systems, they're in the business of filling vessels. So you pop into class, conveyor belt method. We're going to dump some facts in your brain, and we're going to kick you out the door at the end of the day, and hopefully you retain some of those facts. So totally different approach. So Socrates was dead on. It's not about filling the vessel. It's about kindling the flame and allowing the person to learn for themselves. I, I tell my students, and they sometimes mock me for this, but I tell them, I can't teach you anything. You have to teach yourself. You have to develop yourself to such a point that you have a desire to learn, a willingness to learn so that you can go in there and be self-actuating. And, I can passively, using this passive model, I can dump some facts in your head, but it's really not going to benefit you until you have a hunger and desire to learn on your own and to acquire the truth. Okay. And then number 4, I've already led into it here, but number 4, I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. And that's what we're going for, is to help others think for themselves, to reason for themselves, to lift others by their own volition through and by their education. So Socrates was right. And, I can't teach anybody anything. We call ourselves teachers, we call ourselves educators, but really the only person that can really educate themselves is the individual. It's the individual who acts, it's the individual who thinks, it's the individual who has feelings in their heart. And all of those things together, it's their agency to act, to behave, and to improve themselves. And they have to make that choice. They have to want to be educated. And when we give them the freedom to explore, that's when passions get ignited. And that's when it becomes really important. And our modern school system has forgotten that. We don't bother to teach students how to think, and we just cram facts and figures into their heads and require them to regurgitate it for us on tests. And that's the extent of their education, in which they promptly do a brain dump after those tests. Yeah, and I'm just speaking from experience here, both as a student and as a teacher, that's what happens for the vast majority of us. Okay, so number 5, I only wish that wisdom were the kind of thing that flowed from the vessel that was full to the one that was empty. So it's kind of same concept here. Um, you know, we kind of fantasize a little bit, and certainly government officials do, and certainly a lot of public school administrators and teachers do. And it's because it's been conditioned into them over decades and decades. We just think that's the way you're supposed to do it, but in reality, it doesn't work that way. But we think we can just pour knowledge into someone, and they're good to go, and we slap a diploma on them and say, "Yep, they graduated, they learned all these things." But did they really? Did they acquire any wisdom? Do they know how to apply it? Do they know how to take care of themselves in the real world? Do they know how to make the right choice when faced with a moral dilemma? Do they? Probably not. Not unless they're getting it from home, from mom and dad. Maybe they're getting a little bit from church or, from some other organization like Young Marines or 4-H, scouting or Girl Scouts or something like that. Maybe they're getting a little bit there. But they're not getting it in the public school system, I can guarantee you that. And so that moral training, that moral emphasis to be able to develop and to grow and to develop into a great person who has read the great books and understands what truth is and has the courage, the moral fiber to stand up for what's right, that's priceless. And you have to train students that know how to reason and think and can process ideas at a very high level. And so, yeah, we have this fantasy in the public school system that we can just transfer knowledge from a teacher to a student without any work, without any effort, without being struggled for, without application. We just think we can do a brain dump, brain transfer, and all of a sudden the students magically has it. But it doesn't work that way. And so certainly a fantasy of the public schools today and something that Socrates warned about anciently. Okay, so there's some Socratic wisdom for you in regards to our topic of willingness to learn. Okay, so I want to talk about one more concept here, and it's going along with our theme already. And this is really kind of another warning for homeschooling parents as well as those in the public school system. And I'm not saying this in a condescending way. I'm saying this in more of a call to arms, a call to take action and to carry this truth and to do what's best for your children, to do what's best for your students. We have to get back in America the principle of work. We have lost a focus on the principle of work. We don't believe in work anymore in our country. Some of us do, but a lot of us don't. And our systems are set up structurally to discourage work. And that's a big problem. That's a big issue. And so a lot of times what we do as parents and what we do as educators is we try to make things fun for our kids all the time. So we try to make class fun. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. And there can be a lot of value in that. Because a lot of times learning isn't fun. A lot of times it is a lot of work. It does require effort. And so that's my message though, is that we've got to stop sugarcoating work. Educating and training our minds, the student has to understand that that requires work. Reading is mental exertion. It requires tremendous cognition and recognition within our brains on a lot of different levels. Writing's the same way. Writing's even more powerful than reading as far as using different parts of our brain and bringing all of that cognition together to create complete and whole thoughts and ideas. It's just tremendously powerful. So when we're teaching our children how to learn, it's important for us to to build within them a willingness to do the hard work of learning and to take them step by step and just let them know that it's going to be a journey. It's going to be hard, it's going to be tough, but find pleasure in your work. Find the rewards to your work. Find the joy that comes after putting in the hard work, and don't deprive them of the joy and of the satisfaction that comes from putting in the hard work. We can gather pleasure from doing work. We oftentimes think that pleasure comes from just chillaxing and kicking back and doing fun things and having hobbies and having free time. That's where our pleasures come from. But we can find pleasure from our work. We gain pleasure from doing work that builds our minds. We get pleasure from doing things that builds our character and helps us to know how to operate as human beings. We can get a lot of joy and pleasure from that. So I think we do sometimes a disservice to our students and to our children when we sugarcoat learning and we sugarcoat the hard work of reading or the hard work of writing or the hard work of preparing for a debate and or doing the hard work of having a Socratic seminar or a just a educational conversation on a given topic. So, we may start off with very simple books like Dick and Jane books, which I wouldn't recommend, or a Dr. Seuss books. But then we work our way all the way up to Tolstoy, War and Peace, and we work all our way up, all the way up to reading some of the more difficult chapters in the Bible, or we work all the way up to reading Alexander Pope's poems, and there's or Dante. Some of those great works, those are very difficult works to read, but they're so powerful. They're so beautiful, but it takes a lot of work to get to the point where you can read some of those great works. And you start off simple and you build up. So be willing to work. Teach your children to be willing to work. Work is a wonderful principle. Okay, so this is my challenge here. We're going to wrap up. This is my challenge for you personally, and I want you to pass this challenge on to your students and to your children. And so I want you to be on the lookout this week. When you have an opportunity to learn something new, instead of being disgruntled or moaning that you have to put in the effort on it, think to yourself instead, how can I benefit from this learning experience? How can I learn it in such a way that it's interesting to me? How can I learn this in such a way that I can add to the great knowledge and understanding wisdom that I've already got? And if you don't feel like you have very much already, that's okay. Where can I gain a baseline? Where can I build my foundation at? And approach it with that attitude. So I'll give you an example. When my wife was in college, she has no interest whatsoever in mechanical things. Mechanical engineering, anything that moves, that has joints, that functions, goes along mechanical principles, she just really doesn't have any interest in. However, she had an interest in driving a car, and she had an interest in making sure that her investment in a car lasted a long time. And she wanted it to always work when she went to the garage to get her car. And so as a college student, she said, I'm going to take an automotive mechanics class in college. And she did. And she's a school teacher herself, so she was, elementary ed major, but she took an automotive mechanics class, which she was totally out of her comfort zone. But she's like, she was determined to learn how to care for her car. And so she took this class and she learned a ton. And a lot of it was foreign to her, but she really benefited from it. And it's been an asset to her ever since. Well, this has been the Phillip Mason Show. Thank you, my friend, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you. And I just know that if you'll cultivate within yourself a willingness to learn and to build wisdom, it will pay huge dividends into the future. Thank you for being here with me today, and we'll catch you on the next episode.